Thank you very much for FITIS to having us at this session. Thank you very much, Governor, for being with us and gracing this occasion and agreeing to participate in this discussion. First of all, I want to sort of bring about the fact that, Governor, you're governor at a very difficult period, under very difficult circumstances, a difficult environment and challenging issues around you. And I personally, and on behalf of the FITIS, want to recognize and appreciate your resolute efforts to stabilize the economy and put it on a recovery path. And we all are hoping that will succeed and we all will have success. So how I will want to run this session is we have time till 11:30. I have a fair amount of questions to run during that session, but of course I just heard that audience are also welcome to send, and I have an app here that will give me the questions. But our questioning governor has requested that I think we should relate our discussion around technology and the economy as opposed to tax issues, to budgetary issues that have been discussed very much in the environment today. But Governor is here present today to discuss about technology and technology relationship to the economy and the economic revival. So that's the line of questioning. So please, when you are sending questions, be mindful of that. So Governor, still I really will want to, our focus is on economic recovery. The budget presented by the President enunciated sort of his vision for how he sees the economic recovery could take place. He enunciated 3 areas as drivers for the economy. And he specifically mentioned an export-oriented competitive economy. That was the first. And then he said an environmentally friendly green and blue economy, and a digital economy. Now, if you really see all these areas, the information technology industry, the sector, closely integrates with these 3 areas. I think for a long time, there has been a focus of wanting the technology industry to be a key driver in our exports. It has been considered a trust industry, and we are all waiting for that industry to come of age, to really get to what its potential is and aspirations. And of course, sometimes industry says we need an enabling environment to get there. So that's from an export side of it. If you really see from a green and blue economy, the technology industry has a lot of scope and potential to contribute to that as well. From a perspective of digital economy, the industry is the catalyst to really enable the digital economy. Today's tagline is lifeline to overcome turmoil. And today's theme for this session, Governor, is technology as a catalyst for economic recovery. When I say technology, it's about technology industry, technology sector, that's what's been meant. So we really want you to sort of start off, if you don't mind, telling us your assessment in relation to the technology industry, from export diversification to driving exports, to driving digital economy. How you think your assessment of the industry playing a role and in fact being a catalyst in the economic recovery process.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, let me thank for the FITIS for inviting me to this forum. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the kind of position that I'm answering question is basically I'd like to focus on areas that as a governor central bank, especially when you look at the role of the central bank, is as we all know, there are 2 key objectives. One is economic and price stability, which is maintaining inflation at the sustainable low levels. That's a monetary policy. Second, on financial system stability, which is to maintain stability of the financial system And also within that, we have this the other mandates to, as a regulator of payment and settlement, where the technology is playing a greater role from the central bank point of view. So that's where I would like to focus in terms of our mandate. And beyond that, this is why I think as a government central bank, usually we, a lot of people are inviting the government central bank to talk about a lot of other areas, especially when it comes to fiscal policy, the tax policies, all these things are not the purview of the central bank. It is Secretary Minister of Finance or Minister of Finance, and when even if it comes to technology, in a structural way, there's a separate institution called Ministry of Science and Technology, that they should be the authority to talk about it. But when it comes to but I know it's an important area, technology, and this is where, from the central bank point of view, what we see, and the three areas that you mentioned, one is the export diversification. It's obviously important area that promoting exports of this country, adopting technology is very important. From the point of view of productivity improvements and making it easier to do business for the export sectors. So this is where we think, and also the improving the efficiency of the financial system through the banks and non-bank institutions. This is where I think adoption of technology can play a greater role. So this is where I think some of the measures I will talk about later in detail when you ask questions, where how the technology can be utilized or used to improve productivity and make it easier for doing business for the export industries, export-oriented industries, as well as on the digital technology. I mean, obviously that is cutting across all the sectors in terms of, if you look at the what we call in technology total factor productivity, economic growth is part of the capital, labor, and the total factor productivity. That part, if you look at empirical evidence in Sri Lanka, our capital augmentation, labor, the contribution are playing a major role, not so much in terms of technological total factor productivity. That is where the next leap of country's growth should be driven by the total factor productivity growth. What are the sources of total factor productivity as an economist point of view is the use of technology to improve the productivity in all the sectors across the economy. It should not be limited to export orientation. It's basically government services, the payment and settlement, the financial services, and even social safety nets in terms of delivering what you see, what India has done. It's a greater use of technology, and also doing business. For example, now one area that I can talk about is the payment, making it easier for payment for Inland Revenue Department, the customs, all these things, using some of the initiatives that we have taken. I'm sure I can see digital payment settlement earlier, the Assistant Governor, who is much more knowledgeable, talk about it. And also I must say, I'm not an expert in technology. So I'm an economist. So I have some notes that on the technology what we have done, so I can share that knowledge with you. And also other part that you mentioned on the green and blue economy. So our role again is to facilitate that through what they call the Sustainable Banking Network, this initiative that we have introduced to promote and support the kind of sustainable financing practices through banking and non-banking sector. This is also important. I'm glad that President has also announced in the budget those three key areas: export-oriented, and the blue and green economy, and also this technology. So these are the areas we also have our role. And from the blue and green economy, this is where we are basically, this is the future. If you look at the external financing and even domestic financing, the areas, the opportunities for sustainable financing is huge going forward in terms of issuing green bonds, issuing blue bonds, and using the new financing source available globally and locally to promote what they call sustainable economy going forward. This is where I think we have a certain role. I think I can talk about it if you want more details. So let me stop here.
So this was not in my question, but I'm prompted to ask you, if you don't mind, and see whether you will like to answer this. Yeah, so you were saying that you're answering questions as governor, and I think it's then monetary policy as opposed to fiscal policy to other government pronouncements. I just want to just understand, so we see an alignment. This is not part of the questions or the sort of technology related, but given that you mentioned that, I think I'm sure a lot of people might be also interested to know. We see an alignment between monetary policy and the fiscal policy being built and worked on. But we see the government policy pronouncement that comes from the political leadership sometimes not clearly aligned to that fiscal monetary policy stance that's been taken. Would you like to comment on that? Because that's very important for the country.
Yeah, exactly. That's a question that I think relevant to me. I'm glad that you asked that question. So basically, when you look at any country's fiscal policy and monetary policy, I think that's an important question that I'd like to clarify. The authority of the fiscal policy, obviously, the government, Minister of Finance, the cabinet, and the parliament. That is where we call the public finance. Then this is why there is some misunderstanding about the public finance and the country's finance, the fiscal policy and monetary policy. That's important for us to understand the role of fiscal policy, the authority for the fiscal policy, the role of monetary policy, and the authority of the central bank. There are two independent entities that any country, not only Sri Lanka, all over the world, any country that has developed and successfully achieved certain objectives of the economic stability and price stability, are the two institutions independently given the authority for the monetary policy and fiscal. But it does not mean that these two policies cannot go in different directions. There has to be a proper coordination and the complementary between two policies, because that is the overarching objective, is to reach macroeconomic stability, where fiscal policy and monetary policy should have proper coordination, but without being interfered by the monetary policy into fiscal policy and fiscal policy into monetary. That is why the main reason why I would not like to talk about the fiscal policy, that this is a different authority. But I don't want to, basically intervene in that area. Equally, fiscal authority should not intervene in the monetary policy in terms of independence of the central bank. That is why the central bank independence is important. Similarly, authority of public finance is the parliament, including taxes, expenditure, all the other social safety and other policies. But when you look at the Sri Lankan history, one of the major imbalances is that there has been no complementary and coordination between fiscal and monetary policies, and mix up the objectives, and someone trying to, that's what we call fiscal dominance in the monetary policy, in terms of, for example, if the government is running huge fiscal deficits, and government is building up debt to unsustainable levels, which that will have impact on the implementation of the monetary policy. So central bank, although independent, cannot just ignore what is happening in the fiscal policy. It has a direct link. This is why if you look at Sri Lanka's macroeconomic imbalance, key imbalance coming from large fiscal deficits that we have been running for years, decades. And as a result, the debts that we have been building up over a period of time. When the government is running that kind of deficit, that obviously create a large, what they call current account balance in the external account, balance of payment. This is where, if you look at empirically, large fiscal deficits is always causing large current account deficit that has an impact on the exchange rate management for the central bank. That is where if you have an independent central bank and trying to achieve the objectives of the central bank in terms of price stability and financial stability, and the policies of the government, or fiscal policies dragging in the wrong direction, there's always a conflict. This is where what we have seen historically, what we call fiscal dominance monetary policy. When governments have fiscal deficit, central bank has no choice but to the manage that through printing money, what we call deficit financing, that has been happening. This is why the, 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 the medium-term macro strategy that has been announced with the IMF and others is to complementary fiscal policy, where the fiscal consolidation in terms of reducing deficits, achieving primary surpluses is the key objective, which will certainly support the central bank objectives also in terms of stabilizing exchange rate, building up our reserves, and reducing the monetary financing, and also achieving the price stability. This is where I think it's important, and also seeing the interpretation of, the why, I see some people making statement is public finance, it's authority of the parliament, that's correct. But public finance does not mean the country's finance, it's a monetary policy. The monetary policy is about whole country, including the government and the private sector and the whole public, their finances. It's the authority of the central bank. That's why central bank sets the interest rate policy. Central bank determines what kind of interest rates the public should have. That is not the authority of the parliament. Parliament has authority only on the taxpayers' money. They have the authority how to collect taxes, how to distribute that among the social safety net or other expenditure. That is the authority. There is a clear understanding between public finance, which is fiscal policy, and the monetary authority objective is monetary policy is the country's finance in terms of managing external financing as well as the domestic finance of the whole country. This is where the key objective, I think a lot of people would understand. This is where if the important question, if the fiscal policy is going in a wrong direction, it would be very difficult and challenging for the central bank to achieve its objective on the country's financing, which is a monetary policy. That is what we have seen historically, but we have seen certain periods we have been able to achieve the central bank objectives in terms of low and stable inflation. But it doesn't mean that we have achieved overall macro stability because of the increase in debt, large fiscal deficit, create other imbalance somewhere else. It has an impact on the reserves. It has an impact on the exchange rate policy. That's why you see country depreciating currency a lot, not necessarily because of the monetary policy, because of the other impact coming through the fiscal policy. This is why I want to explain this. Thank you for asking that question.
Thank you very much. So how do you deal with this? Because if you don't mind very quickly, I just want to understand if the pronouncements from the legislature to the political leadership undermines the efforts and that impedes the confidence of the public. But do you see a way forward on this to manage this?
Yeah, I think the way what has been announced in the medium term, we have been, it's not something new. If you look at even several times earlier, always this objective or the problems had already been understood and been announced through macro fiscal policy framework, and this is the way to go forward. But all the time what is happening is basically we have not been consistent in achieving those macro fiscal framework on a consistent, predictable basis over a period of time. This is where whenever we go to the IMF, we agree, okay, this is a path we are going. And once IMF program is over, we go back and fiscal policy go in a different direction, monetary policy go in a different direction, then we end up in a repeating cycles of balance of payment. So this is where what is important is the understanding of the fiscal authority, the cabinet and parliament, the importance of this going in the one direction consistently, irrespective of the administration and changing political systems, need to go in one direction. If this direction is changed, then all this instability will come back. This is what is important. It's what I can see now with the crisis. There's a greater understanding of the direction that we can see. If you listen to the parliament debate that's going on these days, even both parties are basically, no one is debating about reducing fiscal deficit now. No one is debating about need for increasing revenues. But in the past, we are saying whenever government introduces new taxes to collect more revenues, always the opposition party says, oh, this is bad policy. But we hardly see that. When this is a positive development with the crisis, that there's a bipartisan understanding of the direction of fiscal policy. That's one thing that I see a positive thing. And if that continues, hopefully going forward, irrespective of whoever the authority, the fiscal, that continues, I think we can see a positive outcome and consistent policies going forward.
Sure, great. Very interesting subject. I will love to debate on this, but I suppose we have to get to some of the other important aspects for the industry. Governor, the central bank issued a statement recently which stated the economic issues in Sri Lanka are encapsulated in deeply entrenched structural weaknesses that are a culmination of lack of policymakers' commitment to undertaking holistic and efficacious reforms. I really, when we read that, I didn't have the opportunity to read the entire report. When you say structural weaknesses, can you be a little bit more specific? And is there a role for technology in this whole space of structural reforms that you're looking at?
Yeah, of course, when you look at the structural weaknesses in our economy, it's something not new. I mean, if you look at what we're talking about, the state-owned enterprises, operational state enterprises, for example, we all know there's several decades of the government running certain businesses are making losses, and taxpayers are bearing the burden, and also the inefficiency of those operations has basically created a lot of problems for people in doing business in terms of cost of electricity, cost of the petroleum, even the airline operations. All these things are basically costing the economy huge. Not only the burden on the taxpayer, but for the private sector to do business. Even if you look at the operations of this customs, ports, in terms of doing business, there are a lot of structural issues that would impede the people in private sector to do businesses. That is where that we need to address all the structural issues. So, example, there's a lot of debate going on, say, why it's difficult in Sri Lanka for people to do business in Sri Lanka. There are huge issues. I mean, if you look at the compare with Singapore, that's why people say we go to Dubai and do business. We go to Singapore and do business. The reason why they are moving the operation is much easier to operate in those kind of the environments where people can do business easily because all structural issues have been addressed clearly. And one way this can be addressed is the adoption of technology. For example, if you are to pay taxes or if you are to pay customs, then if you have a system where you submit your tax return online and then you get the automatically refund or final taxation without being any human intervention. That's where the technology can play a greater role. If you want to, exporter or importer to import something or do the documentation, but still we talk about this digitalization, all this online, all this thing, but still in between the major thing that we are saying is human intervention. Is where the inefficiency comes in. If you have been able to import-exporters submit your document online and get it cleared online, and then things will come out easily. So this is a lot of markers. Those are the adoption of technology for them to even if you go to say the local authority, get the approval for a permit or get electricity connection. All these things. I mean, these are the things that technology can play a great role in improving the efficiency and address, there are a lot of other reforms. For example, state-owned enterprises, you need to restructure, you need to address pricing issues. Those are different issues. But in addition, the use of technology can obviously, one example I can tell you, recently there's a private bus operators came and met me 2 days ago. And they have been asking for this several years, the permission from the Ministry of Transport to use this transport card and use the technology to once you get in the private bus or any CTB even, and this technology is already available. We have given our support and for them to implement, but still in our process, it has not happened yet. But which means that will improve the productivity of this transport industry huge if you introduce that simple technology. That's reduce the corruption. This will enable the private bus operators to have proper incomes and recorded, use the technology, monitor all these things, and have address all these irregularities happening in the industry. All can be addressed. This is a simple technology. And you look at the national ID, this thing, and ability to do KYC online. It's a simple thing that will make a game, can be a game changer. This is why if you look at India, in terms of all the low income countries there in Sri Lanka in terms of per capita, but use of technology is amazing. I mean, that's what we can do going forward.
Clearly, Governor, I think that's the view of the industry as well, and aspirations of the country, and we need to sort of get to this faster than later. And I think there is some progressive proposal that came in the budget, which said that all government payments to be electronically made mandatory with effect from 1st March 2024. Now that's I believe from I'm looking at from a public point of view, and we felt that was very progressive, and I'm sure the industry sees that, and a lot of people sees that as that. I'm just coming to the financial service industry where you are the regulator, and there is a lot of also activity and initiatives to try and build technology to really make the financial services industry progressive and fintech to really enable innovation in the industry. But there are concerns by fintech players, by the banking industry, that the progress is not as fast as what they would like to see. Examples are the KYC, physical KYC, no common shared basis KYC being looked at, and so on and so forth. And also, as you very rightly said, even places like India has been very progressive in introducing digital banking license, a neo-banking license, and in fact, payment bank licenses to fintech companies. I think given the context that we spoke about, it will be very good for you to give a clear idea of how you see this being taken forward by central bank, and whether it can be expeditiously taken forward, because I think that's the wish of the financial service industry as well as the tech industry.
Yeah, that's, I think, a very important area that as central bank we can make a big contribution. I certainly recognize the fact that the adoption of financial technology by the private sector players to the financial sector is basically has taken a lot of time, and there has been delays. So I know that there has been a lot of complaints coming. The reason, I think, one of the issues that we have been facing is the lack of application of technology for financial services. And there are two issues. One is the infrastructure, like real-time gross settlement payments, the ability for the banks to have interbank payments. All this infrastructure and the systems are in place. But the adoption of technology, one key area that I think the delay is basically what I call, even earlier referred, is the digital KYC is something that is basically delaying and blocking this, because we have to be mindful about the other regulation coming from AML safety regulations and proper KYCs. I mean, I'm getting a lot of complaints even now. Someone to open a bank account, it's not that easy. Even in Sri Lanka, even someone from abroad. That's because we don't have the kind of still I think we have introduced it, and we are moving in that direction. The video KYC, and use the NIC and use that data to facilitate these transactions, and also government announcement that encourage a lot more online transaction. But for them to enable, we need to introduce a simpler, easier systems using technology. I know this our Department of Payment Settlement Department and certain initiative by Lanka Pay, a lot of initiatives. But there is a way to go. I think main one to me is the digital NIC, or digital identification, and digital KYC is the game changer. This is where India has made a lot of progress. Once you do that, then it will enable and easier for the financial services providers to provide these services in much more efficient way. I think this is where we are moving. I know we have some work to do. It's not only central bank, we have to have the other infrastructure in place. For example, the NYC linked to the banking system, or passport linked to banking system, or company registration or taxation linked to banking system, and also so that it would be easier for them to do that thing quite easily within seconds. So all this thing that can be done. If you look at other things like what India payment banks and the use of financial technology in the financial service is a lot of progress that they have made. Even the country with not that much of not a high income country, but they have used it that I think we can do that. This is where we should go, but we need to address certain kind of bottlenecks in the overall kind of use of technology, the barriers to use those technology. Those will have to be addressed first, and then we can facilitate that. This is the way forward.
So, Governor, do you think issuing of digital banking license to payment bank licenses to fintech companies, is that something a reality in the near future?
No, I think before there has to be sequencing. First thing, I think what I would like to see the priority is to use more technology and use digital KYCs, enabling all the banks and financial institutions do that first. And once you do that, then there will be opportunities for payment banks, and that's how India also came up. It's not, I don't think, and central bank digital currencies are the area that basically, I don't think we can jump into a situation where once you see that, we should not adopt all these things, but have a proper sequencing and do this first, and then enable the technology adoption, and then go to the next step. So payment banking, digital banking, all these things are central bank digital currency, or all the areas that we are looking at. But I don't think although we have seen that implemented in other markets, we should not be jumping and getting all these things implemented at the same time. We have proper sequencing the steps that we have to. We have a way to go there.
So central bank digital currency is also something you all are working on or are being researched. Is that what you?
Obviously, we have done some work. I think I'm sure the Director mentioned earlier under Mr. Kumaratunga's leadership. We have a research done and looked at what other countries do. I think I can see the best example, the learning that we can basically get from the Reserve Bank of India. There are a lot of work, and right now they are experimenting the central bank digital currency for wholesale payments within the bank system, but the retail is still yet to go. So we would like, because there's a lot of investment will have to happen. It's a very costly this thing, and obviously India can afford that. But for us, we have to look at the cost of bringing that technology. Obviously, there will be benefit. For example, central bank digital currency will reduce the cost of printing notes. There's also huge cost right now, and the currency in circulation is high. The cost of printing currency is also, is increasing continuously. So the medium to long-term strategy is to digitalize and use. It's not cryptocurrency. It's a central bank digital currency. Is a completely different concept, and that can basically make system more efficient. But I think we have to wait and see because those are evolving technologies, and we are carefully looking at the emerging technologies and how practically, actually central banks are using it. There are certain central banks that are already experimenting. We would like to learn, and we have done some research. So we are moving in that direction, but I don't think I can say Sri Lanka will be introducing central bank digital currencies in the recent, in the near future. We are looking at it. But we just want to see how India is doing that, and then we can learn from there.
Sure. Thank you, Anna. I may have to wrap up in about 5 minutes, I think. Maybe 6 minutes. So one of the, I don't know, we will really like to have your observation on this. You might think that this is not your domain, but this is a very critical aspect for this industry, and I would really like to have, industry will like to have your observations on this. We all know ICT industry has been focused as a thrust industry, as I said earlier, for a long time now. we are around, according to Central Bank, we are at 1 billion revenue. Industry believes it's 1.7 billion with 600 plus companies. Maybe you also can sort of give us a feel for why is this difference in numbers. But the more important question is, there is a feeling that in relation to digital services provided by foreign entities, there is no level playing field. And that's the digital economy. The digital economy in Sri Lanka is estimated around 3.47 billion, which is substantial, about 4.5% of GDP. And there is a feeling that fair amount of revenue is draining out of the country without any tax payments by foreign players. And I think there's a bitter feeling within the industry as to whether this is a level playing field. And so I understand this is more fiscal, this is more legislative, but Governor, from your perspective, is there is anything that you can advise the industry and share your perspectives in relation to this?
Yeah, I think this obviously the taxation policy, how you implement the fair taxation. I think in my perspective, what I see is that anyone providing any services in Sri Lanka should be equally taxed. That's a fair principle. I'm not quite sure I know what the issue is there, whether they are paying or not paying taxes, paying different taxes. In my view, the way it should be, any IT, digital services, those are providing that locally. I mean, this is where I know this is a global concern. That's why you see the OECD taxation principle that they have introduced the minimum tax for foreign services. This is where I think one of the reasons why some of the companies basically based in the US are moving into some jurisdiction, there are lower taxes. But to address that, there is understanding OECD taxation principle where wherever you do your services, they should be subject to fair, equal taxation. That is a basic principle that I agree. That the way I see here, how we can implement that in practice. Yeah, I think system here, the difficulty to me is that getting these people into the taxation, the net is difficult. That's because of the weak administration, lack of the technology usage to capture all these people into the tax net. And this is where how this can be addressed is basically if there are anyone who is not paying taxes by foreign service providers, I think we have to have a proper system to first capture what are the services, and then we apply the same taxation. I mean, this law is there, but the application is weak because we don't have proper systems. This is why I think that has to be addressed.
Exactly. So laws and regulations possibly has to come in place to create this level equilibrium. We'll understand the transactions being captured and recorded and been looked at. So I think India has gone that route. There are a few other countries going that route. Governor.
I'm sure the people like you as the audit firms know better than anyone else how to give advice to evade this tax paying taxes.
Yes, clearly. I think we have to get to that. I think that's a very smarting issue for the industry, and I'm hoping that the policymakers will actually look into this. Governor, maybe one more last question. You can answering anything that you would like to say as well. So one of the critical issues the industry faces now is the brain drain. And we have, I think, clearly dwindling capacity of the industry with migrations to whatnot, of course, because of the country's situation. And then we also heard from earlier the professor about importing even resources to supplement this whole thing. And my question is, do you have any perspectives around this? The other one is Port City that's coming up. How do you see, as a central bank governor, it's been formulated with this different legislations, and IT industry and ITMN industry is considered again a thrust industry within the port city also. They want to attract investments in this whole context. So two questions. One is around brain drain, and do you have any perspectives around that? Other thing is about port city. Is it an enabler for the country's economic recovery, and how do you see that playing a role? And plus any other things that you want to answer, and we'll have to wrap it up after that.
Yeah, I think the brain drain, listened to the professor's answer. I think I fully agree what he said. I mean, is although not a direct responsibility of the central bank, but I see the point is very important that person made in terms of brain drain. You see, so in times of economic crisis, and then when there is no confidence of the future for the people will say migrate. But to me, so once we build up the economy and stabilize and regain the confidence, then we should be ready to open up for these people to, I mean, as he pointed out rightly, advantage is that once someone go out and learn, then bring in new knowledge, skills, technology, then we should be ready to welcome them and let them contribute to this economy in terms of their enhanced skills, their knowledge in technology, come back and serve. That is, I think, the point very well taken. I also agree with that. For example, from the central bank point of view, I think I can tell you, we are already basically open, and we are already getting the expert kind of a consultation from people who have already have gained that knowledge globally at the top level. We are basically open, and we are willing to get their services if they are willing, as process it. There has to be a mix. From the institutional point of view, we are open. And the question here is that what I see from the country's point of view, from the professionals, even I don't know, IT professionals, they ask the question, are you willing to open for IT professionals who can serve here, either online or come here and work? So next question I'm asking medical professionals, are you willing to open your sector, talking about brain drain, are you willing to open the sector for foreign professionals? I mean, countries that has developed has open labor policies and open for skill migration, open for skilled professionals, and welcome them to come into these countries. If you look at the US, Australia, Canada, even UK, all these European countries. Imagine even Singapore, Malaysia, imagine those countries were closed for the skilled labor professionals to come in. They wouldn't be in this situation. They would still be like us. And this is a difference that you have to change the perception and be ready to open your mindset. That if you are confident that you are competitive globally, you don't have fear about opening the sector for foreign skills, professionals. And that will have a positive impact, externalities, because once you allow those people to come and work, this is, I'm sure this IT industry, how that was developed. It's not necessarily homegrown development. It's basically the technology, even look at the India, the Kerala, all this IT industry is completely the opening up for foreign professionals, and they come and contribute and develop the industry, share the knowledge, bring in technology. That's how that has been developed. So this is why I think the brain drain is a thing that will happen in times of this kind of crisis. But this can reverse with brain drain can also happen if you are open. This is my take on that. On the port city, obviously, this is a different decision. I think what I see this as an offshore financial center at the beginning, and to provide financial services to the region as an offshore center. So basically without coming into certain local regulations and make it easier. This is again, the whole principle is that the easier of doing business in financial services in that center, like what is in Dubai, what is in Singapore, is trying to replicate similar thing here to provide financial services into the region, subcontinent. For that to happen in reality, we have to have a very efficient, easy of doing. This is where all the separate legislation are there to exempt from local regulation, which make it difficult to do business, and have a separate arbitration, separate, the dispute resolution that can be much more efficient, and people can come and do business and provide services globally. So that is the whole concept. I agree with that concept. I hope with the economy coming back to the kind of confidence building up, there will be companies come and invest in the port city and do that business on the at least regional basis.
Yeah, I'm tempted to ask this question, even though you said it was the last question. But you said when we open out, and we should be open to welcome, embrace these people who may come back, plus foreign resources as well. What's your latest estimate on the ability to open up and for people need to have confidence to come back? I know you keep updating us on what the recovery process would be and when it will come. Do you have any latest update for us as to when this stabilization will happen and recovery will take place, and when we will be open to business again?
Yeah, I think in my assessment, and this is also a relevant question as a government central bank, the short-term stabilization measures we have taken, and we see the results gradually. For example, from the central bank point of view, the why we had very tight monetary policy is to curtail inflation. And now inflation clearly turning around. Disinflation process has started. As I said, we can basically let the exchange interest rates also to come down with the disinflation. That will help the economic recovery going forward. And also the debt restructuring process, I'm confident that we should be able to stabilize that and come to a settlement. With that, once the stabilization complete, then next part is to how we can basically recover from that point and regain. Once you regain the stability, then the recovery. So that is where I think first we have to show that we have regained the stability. That will bring back the confidence to the economy. With that confidence, I think recovery process is much easier once you get the confidence back. And still there are a lot of uncertainties. I know that this is there, but I'm sure that uncertainties can be resolved or addressed soon. With that, we will regain the stability, and then from that point, it's a path of recovery going forward.
So thank you very much, Governor, for a very informed discussion. I enjoyed the discussion, and thank you very much for that. And thank you very much to the audience. I'm hoping that it was quite insightful and interesting for the industry as well. And thank you very much for your engagement. With that, we close.